Good morning. I'm Dean Miller, the President and CEO of PACT, and I want to welcome you to our SaaS Roundtable. This is a program where you get to hear from leading companies, leading experts in the space, but also contribute in a conversation. And there's going to be some good roundtable discussions around that. I want to first off thank our sponsors, Bernstein, BDO, Boomi, Signity, Oars Partners, SAP, SEI, and Troutman Pepper. We have tremendous supporters, certainly of our community, of our entrepreneurial community, and in this case, specifically SaaS companies. If you missed it this morning, there's an email sitting in your box. We released our capital report, and it's a timely release. It is all of 21, by the way. Spoiler alert, the news is really good, and particularly around enterprise technology. Something obviously very near and dear to people that you're going to hear from this morning, as well as the participants. Enterprise tech continues to be a real area of success and strength in Philadelphia, but sometimes you might not know because it's not the brand name companies that you often pass on the street. I also want to point out that our forum conference is coming up on April 27th. It is live at Penn State Great Valley. And so I'd encourage you to check that out. Again, you'll see links to that in your email. We'll make sure that we even put it in chat here. But the Forum Conference is a leading conference on enterprise technology, next generation. And specifically this year, the theme is Beyond Automation. We have some leading speakers from around the country. You're not going to want to miss it. Great opportunity to get back in person, Penn State Great Valley on April 27th. All right, this is a webcast. You're all muted. Please ask questions. You can use that in the comments box. We will monitor it throughout. The panel will go to about 9:35, and then you're going to be directed to subject-specific roundtables where you can do some networking, but also obviously talk face-to-face with your fellow participants and our esteemed panel here about the topics of choice. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ned Moore. Ned doesn't need a lot of introduction. He is a serial entrepreneur. In this area, he is currently the CEO of Clutch. He's certainly a great friend to PACT and supporter of this community and entrepreneurs, gives his time in so many different ways. And Ned, welcome and thank you for leading this conversation.
Thanks, Dean. Happy to be here and happy to be here virtually. And I'm pretty excited that you're doing forum in person. It'll be great to see some people face to face. So glad we're all getting back to that too. So we have a pretty exciting panel today. I'm really excited about it. This is a topic that being in SaaS has been evolving, for the past several years. And what does customer success mean, and how do we implement it, and what should we be thinking about as far as how to do this properly? So we have a really solid panel of experts here who have been dealing with this, and I'm super excited to hear what they have to say. I'd also say, please ask questions. I know that at least in our company, we've had a lot of questions back and forth about this topic. So, you can put your questions in the chat there, and let's make this a roundtable discussion to the extent we can. So our first what we'll do is we'll just have the panelists kind of introduce themselves and talk a little about their companies and customer success. And then after that, I think we can jump right into some questions and take the conversation from there. So Frank, who joins us from Chicago, we appreciate the extra hour early getting up with the coffee. Frank, why don't you take us out here and lead us off?
Perfect, Ned. Thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you today. Really honored to be here. Just an introduction about myself. So as Ned said, my name is Frank Ciannella. As you see on the screen, I'm the head of our Cloud Ambassador organization at SAP America. I've had the pleasure of being at SAP for over 20 years now. So being able to see the organization really change from a pure on-premise enterprise software provider to now, 100% full bore into the SaaS and cloud world. And I've been part of our consulting delivery organization for my first 12 years here at SAP. For the past 9+ years, I have been part of our customer success organization. And what does that mean? It's all about helping our customers successfully adopt and deploy their solutions and really focusing on helping them get the business outcomes with their investments with SAP. For the past 3+ years, I've been the head of our Cloud Ambassador team. So my team works with select customers across each of our line of business solutions whether it's procurement, human resource management, customer experience, all SaaS solutions. So we're very keen on that customer success driving towards renewals. If you look at SAP just at a high level, customer success is incredibly important. Yes, we love bookings, we love revenue, of course, we all do. But when we talk about customer success and we get to that renewals, it's a lot less expensive to have a renewal than it is to keep going after the new bookings, the new revenue. So the whole journey from even before a customer signs through their implementation or their adoption of our solutions, how do they consume it going forward, and then the renewal. So we'll talk a lot more about that. But from an SAP perspective, we're 100% all in that entire journey, revamped entire organizations here to really just focus on customer success, not necessarily selling. And happy to get into more of that now, but just a 50,000 foot view of myself and SAP, and that I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Frank. And next up, we have Hilary Curran from Guru, who has an interesting perspective on this too. So Hilary, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, good morning, y'all. It's great to be here. I'm located in Philadelphia, but I have lived in a lot of different cities. I lived in Chicago, Pittsburgh. I grew up in Arkansas, so I've been all over the U.S. But it's good to be here today virtually. So I work at Guru. Guru is a company wiki that works in your workflow to try to bring you the right information that you need to do your job, regardless of what team you're on. We started in Philadelphia. We have offices in San Francisco as well, and then we're obviously now fully remote if folks want to be, in a different location. My background, I actually come from the nonprofit space, and I was doing a lot of Salesforce and Slack and sort of technology SaaS optimization for large nonprofits across the US, and then found Guru once I moved to Philadelphia and have been here for almost 5 years now. Like any startup, I think customer success starts out. When I started at Guru, we were much smaller. We managed everything, so support, customer education, all of the things that were sort of after the sale were all on us. Now that we've grown, we've probably grown, I would say, like 6 or 7x since I started. Customer success has become much more of a revenue driver, I would say, both for retention and expansion. While our primary goal at Guru in customer success is to sort of allow our customers to achieve the outcomes that they're hoping to achieve, we also try to incentivize our customer success managers to drive retention and also expansion because it is a product-led growth company. We have a lot of organic expansion that happens, which is awesome, but we also want to make sure people feel that they are able to grow with the company. And so actually just recently, and this is why I was really excited to join this panel, our team took over the renewal and retention process. It used to be managed by the sales team. And so it's been a really fun shift. And I've learned a lot already. So excited to talk more about it today.
Great. Thanks, Hilary. And last but certainly not least, we have Josh Smith, which he brings an interesting perspective in design and how this all kind of ties into CS. So really interested to hear Josh's background, and tell us a little about yourself, Josh.
Yes, hi. Pleasure to meet you all virtually and get a time to chat. Yeah, my name is Josh Smith. I was born and raised in Berwyn, Pennsylvania, right outside Philly, if you all know that. But I live out in Lancaster County now, surrounded by the horse and buggies. So I've been a design leader at multiple organizations. Unknown to me, those 3 or 4 organizations that I have been to, enterprise SaaS tech companies in the area, I joined at a time where they all not only wanted to invest in user experience and build that practice integrated into the product development lifecycle into the other lines of business, but they also wanted a platform and smash all their products together because they realized that the pains of having multiple segmented products is more painful to folks, to clients who work with different vendors. And that pain is growing. So taking multiple internal products and trying to create platforms out of them, something that I've done several times over. Currently work as a head of design for a company called United Effects with a group of folks who all have done that for organizations, platformed. So we're building an enterprise operating system that provides a foundation to connect and organize users, customers, data across your products. But the reason I'm here with respect to customer experience is every time I join these organizations that are rapidly scaling, I've connected with the heads of customer success or support and spoken with them about, hey, we've got a lot of data here in product. We've got a lot of opportunity here, expressions and understanding of customer frustrations and unmet needs. And there's probably a lot of value in relating that to the data that customer success has and correlating that to retention, or correlating that to costs and how we can lower costs and making business cases in order to, from our side, our interest on the UX side, increase customer satisfaction and meet unmet needs, and then on the CS side, actually correlate that to lower costs and support and an increase in retention. So I've done that several times as well. So really looking forward to supporting the other panels here in conversation.
Great. Well, thanks for the introductions. And actually, it's interesting, Josh. I'm going to kind of jump off a little bit here and kind of ask my first question in relationship to some of the things you were just talking about as far as costs and how, really one of the things that we always think about is what type of metrics should we be tracking here, and like what really are customer success metrics versus customer support metrics versus account management? And I think it's a twofold question, right? Like, what kind of metrics do you guys use to kind of really figure out, hey, is CS being effective? And also, how do you think about incentives and compensation, in the team driving those metrics? So it's kind of a twofold question, but I'm going to get complicated on you early here. So I hope you had your coffee. I don't know who wants to go first.
I can jump in, Ned, if it's all right. Let me maybe address the latter half first, which was the incentives and how do you motivate the team and how do you look at that? And certainly at SAP, our customer success is not motivated or driven by revenue, right? It's really not a key metric. There are things like Net Promoter Score, which is very important, where we're out polling customers to determine, essentially, if you're not familiar with NPS or Net Promoter Score, would you recommend such and such to your friend, basically, is the real question. That's a big determination as to, are our customers happy? And if they're happy, they're more than likely to be successful with what they're using from SAP. We're also looking at things from what we call current cloud backlog, or what do we expect over the future 12 months from a renewal, a retention, new revenue. That's certainly starting to factor more and more into when you talk about compensation and incentives. So I'll be the first one to admit, we're not the old pros here, right? We've kind of started off in an on-premise world, and it was very different the way you wanted to incent folks and the way you went about customer success. Net Promoter Score has been pretty consistent, but things like looking at your cloud backlog, looking at the entitlements that a customer is using versus what they're entitled to. Is there a big gap there or not? If it is, how do you address that gap? So there's a number of different ways from an incentive standpoint we look at it, and maybe I'll stop and let the other panelists comment on the rest of the question.
I'll go.
I'm meeting here. Thanks,
Frank. No, I completely agree with Frank. I think it's definitely evolved as our team has grown and our company has grown, and sort of like customer success has evolved over the past 5 years since I've even been here at Guru. I will say, I do believe sort of one of the things that I try to stick to is that we shouldn't be 100% measured by renewals or revenue. It should definitely be more based on like a salary, where you are incentivized to help the customer in all the ways that you can, but sometimes there's just things that you can't do, right? And that someone shouldn't be, in any sort of bad state in their job because a customer isn't cooperating, right? That's just not fair. And so what we've started to do at Guru, as we've taken on more of the responsibility for renewal, is we've just added a variable component that's extra motivation and incentive around renewals and around kind of this growth. But it isn't necessarily something that's going to like completely stress you out if something doesn't happen. So it's there to sort of drive certain behaviors around making sure that, maybe you have a client that you haven't talked to in a while but hasn't responded. that you're going to probably try to reach out to them a little bit more than maybe you would have in the past. But it's also not going to cause you to stress out about it if you do have a lot of other customers that are more priority based on other things that, based on them being really engaged. And so having a little bit of a variable component has definitely helped. As far as other metrics that we use to measure success, I love kind of what Josh is saying about kind of product data as well as customer success data. We've worked with our product team as well as our business analytics team to basically review all the different product related actions that someone could take in the product, and then try to see if those are correlated to retention or expansion. And if they are, then we've put them into what we call like a customer health score. And it's just a component of a bunch of different attributes. And so we don't measure CSM success on that, but it is a tool that we can use to sort of assess where someone is in the product and if we need to maybe spend more or less time with them. And also it's just like an interesting thing to kind of have it in your tool belt whenever you're trying to decide where you want to prioritize your time. So we don't measure the CSMs by it, but we definitely like use it day to day. So we have a customer health score, and then obviously like a measurement around net retention. So how much is, has your book of business grown minus the churn?
Gotcha. That's super brilliant. By the way, Josh, before we get to you, we have one quick specific question that was geared at Frank's comments. You talked about incenting people for NPS score. Someone asked, is that a simple like 5 to 10% bonus if they hit a simple NPS score, or how are you guys actually doing that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily that simple. It's more of a holistic approach. I think Hilary touched upon, as you have a bunch of customer success resources, sometimes you may have no fault of your own, some customers who aren't happy or because it's a support issue or there's a product gap. So it's not necessarily a straight one-to-one. I would say for us, it's part of the overall equation as to how we look at success overall. And then from a compensation or from a bonus perspective, as the question addresses, there's a number of different factors that usually are looked at more in a larger region, if you will, versus individual customer assignments. Because you don't want people to be so-called penalized, if you will, because of certain individual actions that really are outside of their control.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Thanks. Josh, why don't you want to take a crack at my double-edged question there?
Yeah, no, I'm here to support and build on the leaders here in CS. So when CS leaders do, or CX leaders do come along and ask for thoughts about like what in the product can you do? Whenever anyone says NPS, I usually expand that to multiple options. And I only do that because NPS, it is a quantitative attitudinal survey that's on a scale of 1 to 10, where 8 and above is considered the promoter. That presumes that a user knows the difference between a 7 and an 8 when they're asking to decide. And a 10 scale is actually a 5 scale or a Likert is much more accurate than a 10 scale, because we're asking users to find discrepancies between what is it? Am I a 2 or am I a 3? What's the difference? Additionally, with NPS, they allow you the opportunity to provide comments, but feedback doesn't always allow you to pinpoint the exact themes or patterns that are the reason for their decision in an NPS score. You kind of have to postulate. An NPS score is only as good as the actual research or qualitative interviews that you conduct afterward. There's other options out there. There's the Gallup CE11. There's your general CSAT scoring, which is on a Likert scale, on a measure of really angry to really happy. Regardless, though, you can take all of these and you can use behavioral analytics tools to bake these into your products and to surface them for specific cohorts at certain points in the experience, so that you can get these scores directly in time with areas of the product you think are either really critical to certain metrics or they're of concern or of question. And when you do that, you are now connecting an attitudinal survey to an actual in-time place product, so that you can actually get a match of, well, what do we pay attention to and what do we not? So.
Cool. Very interesting.
Maybe Ned, I can, maybe if you don't mind if I add just a comment about an NPS, if I will. It's so Josh has some great points. I would say it's also really important to make sure you're pulling the right people in the organization. and doing the necessary follow-up. And you can imagine it can get a little bit out of control if you're not. So it is really important to be targeted and specific with that as well.
Got it. Thanks, Frank. So one other kind of theme that we have talked about is really this the difference between, and it kind of goes back to a question that was asked too, is like, how do you decide, is it customer service? Is it customer success? Is it support? Is it client success? What is it? And I think, some of these things are semantics, whether it's customer success or client success, but I think it does really bring it through, like, is it support? And, we think of it not as support kind of in our organization. And I know we've had a little discussion about that. And how do you think about CS as full lifetime kind of customer engagement versus just the support function? And kind of a follow-on to that question is, how do you make it clear to the people in your organization what the difference is? Because sometimes our people get confused a little bit too. Like, well, we're just doing support here. It's like, well, not really. Like, this is a full engagement kind of model. And so I'd be interested to hear what you guys do to kind of not only think about that, kind of broadly, and then how do you really get your folks on the floor to kind of understand, how that works and where they fit in? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So it's an important distinguishment, first off, right? Customer success versus customer support. Here at SAP, we look at them very differently. We certainly have what we call support, which is, primarily product support, if you will. And your customer has an issue with the product per se, or question. We have an entirely different organization that focuses on that product support, that customer support. Now, customer success resources will get involved in that if perhaps it's kind of stuck in the mud or something, or it's not going the way we want it to. But we look at customer success as so much more broad than just support. It is everything, Ned, you touched on. It's the entire life cycle and lifetime of the customer with SAP. It starts from before they even sign their first contract with SAP, and making sure they have a great onboarding experience, making sure that that handoff from the sales to the delivery is really, really done well. It's now all about, it's software as a service, right? So it's about delivery. And it doesn't end when the customer is live, right? You want to make sure that they continue to be aware of what you have from an innovation standpoint, from a roadmap perspective, so that as the customer is plotting out their future, you're doing it together, so that they're coming together. And then it's all about making sure that renewal is kind of an afterthought, if you will. And support's a really important part of that, because it's how customers interact with your company a lot post-sale, right? Or even post-go live. But from a customer success standpoint, like I said, we're looking at it from the very beginning, and really an infinite loop. It doesn't end, where support's going to have certain touch points with the customer that are really important. But from our side, again, it's just a single component of that overall customer success.
Want me to go? No, I'm semantics are hard, especially in customer success. Or I grew up, my title is Director of Customer Experience, and then that's evolved since I've been here. When I started on this team, we were called Customer Success Rock Stars, and then we've changed it over the years. And I think one of the things that has happened is we've definitely started to specialize. So like I mentioned, when everyone was on this team was managing kind of the whole customer journey, as we grew, we started to create specialties. And I think the first one that was very easy to hire and realize was an important differentiator was technical support. And so that team is now an entire team at Guru that does all of our inbound chat. They manage more of the bug process and trying to fix all of those things. They work really, really closely with our engineering team, and they've kind of evolved their name. So now they're called technical support, just to sort of even more make it clear that this is the technical experts of the product. The customer success team has still leveraged the name customer success. And we also have an implementation specialist group as well that works more just on getting people up to speed or onboarded. The way that the customer success managers sort of make it clear to the customer that there are these different players that may engage with them throughout their experiences, we try to really make it clear the expectations. Like, I'm here to be a consultant for you. I'm here to help you achieve your outcomes with the product. But we also have this amazing team that is working every day with all the rest of the customers of your size and larger, and they'll be able to answer your technical questions way faster than I will. If you send me an email, I may not see it for a couple of hours. They're going to respond immediately, right? And so trying to set those expectations to make sure that folks understand that there is a difference. And then also but also responding if they do reach out to you, if you're on a call, and show that you have that technical expertise. So just really being sure that you're setting the expectations for when they should engage with you and when they should engage with maybe with another team. And I think calling it success, at least at Guru, has made it feel more proactive focused and future focused versus support, which feels a little more reactive and sort of kind of fixing things. So that's sort of how we've defined the two roles at Guru so far.
Great. Hilary, we had a specific question to some of your comments there. Mm-hmm. So how are you capturing the customer success data? And if you're tracking the usage data within your assisted product platform, are you using a CRM like Salesforce or something like that? And are there surveys involved? And is there a lot of report experts or analysis and Excel that goes on? Kind of how do you just describe kind of how you're dealing with it all?
Yeah, data is the greatest gift. It also can be a huge enemy because it's so overwhelming kind of where to start. And we have a lot of data in SaaS because we have all this access to everything that people are doing in the product because it's software. So I think over the years, we've learned to try to be smart about what information we actually care about, but also not try to kind of overanalyze things and really just talk to the customer sometimes if you're starting to kind of drive yourself nuts. The main things that we leverage, we have Salesforce, which has a lot of our customer relationship data, right? And then we also leverage Pendo, which is a software that connects to the back end of our product that has a ton of product usage data around clicks, around workflows, around all these different things. Our product team really owns that solution and delivers a lot of the data. It's probably something that Josh has mentioned. And then we also just have a ton of analytics in our own product that we have access to. And so we have a business operations team that sort of culminates all that together in this beautiful place and then tries to serve up different insights that they think are relevant to us. We also try to ask for certain insights and then they can go back and report back on those. But it's sort of a back and forth of them saying this is something we think would be really cool for you guys to use. And then us also kind of requesting things as they come up. But we have a lot of data living in a lot of places and we try to make sure that it's all in one spot that we can then, experiment with different insights from. Hope that answers the question.
Yes, that's super helpful. I was actually thinking about too, with us, some of the metrics we have to kind of bifurcate, right? So some of the metrics are very internal to us that the customer doesn't really care about, but could be great signals for us, right? Like daily average usage, monthly average usage, sign-ons, kind of what they're doing. The customer doesn't really care about that stuff typically. And then you have external kind of metrics, right? Things where they're getting value from the product. How do you guys then there's some gray area with some metrics in there that kind of, maybe spread the gap. Do you guys deal with that at all? Or how do you guys think about that? It'd be kind of good to get your perspectives.
And then from a value perspective, it's a great question because you're right on the metrics and Hilary was spot on with the data, right? It's great to have it and we thumb through it all, and all that stuff. I think for us, the way we've generally approached it now is, in the very beginning, what does success look like defined by the customer, by the sponsor of whatever program they're going down? What are those business outcomes that they're targeting to get? And then make sure that is kept as a forefront of the conversation going forward. I love what Hilary said. Sometimes you just need to talk, right? You need to be involved with the customer. It can't all be done through interfaces and tools. So are they achieving that value? And if they are, wonderful. Let's make sure they continue to. If they're not, hey, what can we do to help them get there? Because we do know that if they're not getting the value, it's just another tool. It's just maybe another heartache for end users that they don't want to do it. So it's very important to look at the data, like adoption. You mentioned the metrics, right? Usage metrics, all that stuff, and marry that up with what were the expected outcomes and what are the outcomes. And if they're not what they were expected, what can we do to help them get more of the value out of it? And it all has to do with working with the sponsor of the program and helping to understand and drive that. But again, it begins at the very beginning.
Josh, any thoughts on this? I think, as you think about CX and design, this probably dovetails into a lot of this stuff, I would think.
Yeah. The most common metrics. So for tools like Pendo or for Gainsight, the most common metrics are your throughput so you have to identify what are your key or critical paths in your product, the most valuable ones. And what's the throughput of those? Meaning how many people drop off? and never get to our presumption of what the end state or end states are. And you can do that in these tools. You can also do time to task. How long does it take to get from end to end? How long does it take to get from step to step? If customer success is able to categorize the kinds of issues that they're seeing by theme or by specific type of issue, you can correlate that to the data and say, oh, let's see what's going on, and based on the number of people you're seeing, because that's a funnel in of itself. That's not the total number of people dealing with the issue. It's the number of people who are willing to call and connect. Let's actually find out what percentage of those folks are the actual size of folks that are dealing with the issue, because you can do that in the tool. You can say, okay, oh, there's a huge drop off here. That's exactly what CS has been saying from their interaction with customers. And it looks like this percent of our customers are actually dealing with it. You can correlate, and if you can correlate this somehow to like some measurement of cost per ticket, or cost per issue on CS, you could get a relative overall cost savings of fixing it. Not only would you be lowering your costs because CS is not dealing with that issue anymore, but you're increasing customer satisfaction and you're impacting retention too, because now the product is easier to use. So that's one example of straight like product to customer support relationship where we can just start showing the business, hey, you want us to be more, as Hilary mentioned, you want us to be more proactive than reactive. You got to get rid of, we got to shave off all of this stuff that is keeping us from being proactive. So.
Cool. Yeah. Interesting. And you got me thinking, and also around the data piece, like how is automation, how can we use automation in the best fashion, right? Because it is a thing, and Hilary and Frank both mentioned it, there's a lot of automation we want to put in place for all the right reasons, but at the end of the day, we're people, and sometimes you need to pick up the phone, and sometimes we need to talk to somebody. And how do you guys rationalize where automation makes sense, and when you're defining the process, what kind of automation, what kind of tools are you guys using? You had mentioned Gainsight and Pendo, and I think there's others. What's the tool set, and how do you think about where and the best way to kind of utilize automation?
I guess I'll start off there, Ned. We have a pretty vast customer success organization in general here, and I guess it's one of the advantages of being a very large organization to begin with, right? So there's a lot of people, and we generally have folks assigned to specific accounts. So there's a lot of that higher touch, the one-on-one, right? There is also the automation capturing the data, but then you look at it from a scale perspective. Obviously, we need automation in that process. So things like the usage, the measuring that against the entitlement of what the customer can actually use, automatically generating reports that tell you, hey, this is where you're at from a usage standpoint. This is where you're at from a maybe risk of churn or renewal standpoint, and really having those available on demand. So I don't know technically how all that happens from an automation standpoint. As a consumer of that type of data and those reports, I see that, and I just find it to be very handy, because when you're looking at this across an entire region, for example, the whole Northeast, or maybe it's all of North America, to try to capture that all individually, and we use a tool called Tatango, or these other tools. You can get that, but then there's some custom reports typically downloaded Excel. It's not very efficient. So, what we've done here is we've captured all that data, and then be able to allow us to ad hoc go get those reports and really assess it, not just at a customer level, but at a region or an industry or what have you. So there is a lot of automation, especially when it comes to scale. But to your point earlier, it doesn't replace picking up the phone for a lot of those key accounts.
Hilary, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. So Rick Nucci is the CEO of Guru, and he also founded Boomi, which is an integration platform. So he's very fond of integrations. And we always try to, think about how to thoughtfully integrate with other solutions, but also like where we can potentially optimize or automated solution, not to remove a human, but to make it a lot easier for the human to, engage and do their job in a much more efficient way. I think what I've seen as we've grown is when you start to see that there's like something that you're kind of always doing, whatever that action is it something that could be a lot easier and still have the same effect if it was automated or delivered in a different way? And so we've built out a lot of things like with calendar booking for CSMs, like that becomes a big pain. And so we tried a bunch of different solutions. Right now we're using Chili Piper to sort of make it really easy for customers to book calls without a bunch of back and forth stuff. So that's one big area. As far as like content and things like that, we use our own product to sort of have a ton of templates and guides to how to respond to certain scenarios. There's a ton of product information, email templates, all that stuff lives in Guru. And so it's really easy for customer success managers to sort of copy paste that into an email and then edit it and make it more tailored to the customer. Just saves a bunch of time. The other thing that we're looking at, we haven't implemented yet, but our CSMs are spending a lot of time preparing executive business reviews or EBR decks. And so there's a new software, several different ones out there that you can basically have it like automatically pop in the different data points into the slides automatically by like just clicking the customer. And so we're thinking about potentially automating that in a sense, because it does take a lot of time to pull the data and, pick out which charts you want to show to executives in a business meeting. So those are sort of the three sort of like activities we do. As far as the sort of optimizing our day-to-day and like the data that we're reading, we've grown a ton with having a business operations team has really helped us like sort of streamline which data we're looking at and making sure that it's the same data that other teams are also looking at and it's not misaligned. The other thing that we've done from a sort of customer success standpoint is we created a team of an entire product team that has a product manager and engineers on it that work specifically with our implementation team to make sure that the requests that we're seeing customers ask over and over again in order to like get started with Guru. There's a team of product folks that are also thinking through how can we make this an automation. Maybe it's a really quick like Google sheet that they can upload things into, or just how to make that any little ask that they have multiple times like a really easy thing. And then eventually those things potentially could be moved into the product. And so that saved us a lot of time and headache. Kind of to Josh's point, like if you can sort of prove the value of like, oh, if we build like a small version of this and see if people leverage it, maybe then we can, get some time on the product roadmap to actually build it in the product. And so that's been really successful for us.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And the idea that you have kind of a product team, like really, involved in the implementation process, I'll call it, to kind of really see what's happening and see if there's areas for product design. That's cool because, that's one of the points that gets dropped off sometimes, right? Is like the customer success stuff, we're dealing with all this, and then we have to build a feedback loop to product to make sure they're seeing it. That's really interesting the way you guys are doing it. Josh, what have you seen there? I mean, I know you're usually kind of on the product, design side here. What are some good ways that you can make sure that product team is close to what's happening so they get, quickly and efficiently areas that should be productized versus just, things that are going to have to be built a process around for customer success?
So I've got different solutions that some are more radical than others. Like the most radical, one of the most radical ideas that I always advocate is we should all create product teams around specific discrete pieces of value, and we should have everyone in there. So whatever customer success team, like the idea that like customer success is over here and product is over here, that bothers me. Get them into the conversations, get them included, have the UX researchers cross-train with the customer support so that customer support understands how to maybe ask like open-ended questions to try and dig in. And suddenly they're researchers in conversation, and have customer support be embedded in and being and listening into what's going on and what's coming up. The thing that we often do is when we want to understand like what's parity with our competitors, we always go to our competitors and see what they're doing. What we should be doing is treating CS as the place to go for where we're missing basic expectations, because they're directly engaging with our customers, and customers love to talk about what's missing. They're really good at talking about where basic expectations are missed. They may not be very good at talking about, future ideas, think like disruption, But if the wheels are missing on the car, they're going to tell you they're missing. So they may not be the ones to invent automated driving, but to that regard, I'd say how do you connect customer success into the product experience and treat customer success as the ones who are helping us understand what basic expectations look like and how that evolves over time. And even like another radical idea, even if that means taking some level of capacity allocation in your development team for that, if the volume is high enough, because if you don't focus on that, you're going to be very well behind your competitors over time. Then you're going to be catching up by looking at what they do, and then you're going to be adopting experiences from them that may not be the right ones for your customers. But they might be the ones that prospects are asking for because they use that product. I've got a million ideas, but those are just a couple.
No, that's great stuff, Josh. Appreciate it. Really good. Question came by to Josh. Can you elaborate on how to set up your team's values around delivery that you're talking, that you were just describing there? Any kind of thoughts in relation to that?
Oh, that's another. It depends. Conversation. It's entirely usually based on where the company is at the time and what works best. Because one size fits all it can be highly disruptive. But if you're an organization of an appropriate size where you can separate. I don't know how Mustafa. I don't know how your company's breaks out work into distinct development teams, because that has an impact. But if it is based on certain areas of the product or certain user journeys, and if customer success is also organized similarly, then my question would be why aren't they on the team then? It's most disruptive when you find out that the organizational structure of CS and the organizational structure of product development are different. How do they organize their dev teams and their work? How does CS organize? But if it's similar enough, then I usually ask, why aren't they in the team? What's stopping them from being part of the conversations?
One idea just to add in, if you want, how we've done it at Guru so far, and it may not be scalable as we get bigger, but the customer support or technical support team and the customer success managers, after they've been at Guru for a fair amount of time and feel like they, have their day-to-day job down, there's an opportunity for them to apply to be what we call the pod champion. And so all at Guru, similar to Josh is saying, all of our product development teams are organized into different pods based on parts of the product. And so the support and CSMs can basically apply to be the customer voice in that pod. And they're expected to go to the stand-ups and also provide any sort of feedback to new designs, new features, and then also kind of report back to the customer experience team around what's happening in that pod. And that's been a really cool way for us to build this cross-team collaboration, but also make sure that we're not building a product or designing a feature that we know people aren't going to want, or needs to be totally different or maybe adjusted before they even get to a certain stage, which we found was happening before we had this structure. So that's just one way that you could try is sort of make it a kind of a cool promotional or part of your role as on the customer success team, is that you get to do this sort of additional representative thing for the team. And that's been a cool way for us to do it as we've grown.
Cool. That's interesting. Thanks, Hilary. Shifting gears a little bit here, just want to ask you a quick question on how you guys think about staffing and ratios and how many people should we have, and because I think that question kind of comes up a little bit too, and obviously it can vary a lot, right? If you're doing kind of a lot of SMB versus a lot of enterprise, and so that can be kind of a loaded question. But if you guys can give us kind of insights into how you think about staffing and what's the right kind of ratios or sizing there, I think that's a question we get a lot. As to are we overstaffed? Are we understaffed? What should we be doing here? So.
It's a hard one to answer, Ned. Don't want to give everyone the wrong answer here, but from our perspective here at SAP, and my personal perspective is, you can't staff for the maximum, right? Because it doesn't make sense, right? We look at it. from a staffing person, there's the automation on a lot on the lower, the smaller side, I should say. But we look at like there should be, from a customer success resource standpoint, each individual is probably focused on. It's really going to be determined on the size of the customer you're engaging with. Anywhere from 6 to 12 when it's a high touch, kind of hands-on, direct relationship. But then when we look at the smaller end of that, it could be 1 to 100 or 1 to 200, because it's much more of a digital type of model. There's a lot more automation. There's a lot less high touch, and a lot of it is just driven based on the size of the customer and what they're doing with us, et cetera. So it's not a one size fits all by any stretch of imagination. We've got the very, very large, strategic customers. They're going to get one person, right? And that person's going to work with them primarily. And then we're going to, as I said, kind of size it based on, customer need, customer experience, and really what we're trying to drive outcomes with that customer. So there is no one size fits all. You have to kind of look to see what you're trying to accomplish along with your customer, to look at the staffing accordingly. And again, from our side, purely customer success, not focused on the support side of it. To Hilary's point, there's a whole product technical support that's different. Right. So I don't know if that's really answering the question, but it's certainly one way to look at it. It's how we look at it.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thanks. Hilary, I don't know how you guys think about ratio issue.
I mean, startups are hard because I feel like I'm constantly interviewing. So I think we're always hiring. We all check out our jobs board. But what I would say is what I think we've toyed around with in this, or experimented with in customer success at Guru, is like, how many customers can someone handle and really feel like they have the time to sort of step back and actually do like this cool, I always call it like magic work, where they're like finding these cool insights and like doing things that really help to create this really amazing customer experience, or like shine a light on this unique thing that the customer is doing that then our whole company can see. And if you're overwhelmed with completing renewals and like you're just in this grind, you won't have the opportunity. And so really making sure that we are constantly monitoring the bandwidth, and that can just be a conversation with the CSM around like, how are you feeling about your account? Like, do you feel like you're underwater? And so we'll try to adjust kind of as we grow. What we have realized, and what's been a change in the past year, is that we've seen that there's a lot of value in putting a CSM, even for maybe a shorter period of time, but with high potential growth customers, because they are growing really fast and they need help and they need someone to talk to. So they might not have been a customer that we would have had a CSM assigned to historically, because maybe they weren't paying us that much, or they were just small in size. But if we have indicators based on like how they're funded, or maybe, they just were acquired, or anything sort of thing like that we can tell based on the data that's out there, we may sort of offer up the ability for them to work with a CSM, even if it's maybe for a shorter period of time, to see if that can lead to some really great opportunities. And so we have broadened sort of the amount of customers that a CSM manages this year, and also sort of grown the team in a sense, because we do want to cover a lot more of our customer base. But that's an experiment, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, there's most of the time I would say CSMs at Guru manage between like 15 and 30 accounts. And some of your accounts may be those like high potential, high growth customers. And then some are going to be the really high flying, like enterprise level, that you're going to spend maybe more time with your day to day. And so you kind of get a mix of everything if you want. But there's also the opportunity as we grow to potentially like create more niche, like maybe someone that just has a small number of accounts, like Frank was saying, or a customer success manager who's mainly managing those high growth accounts, right, at a much larger scale, and doing more of an automation thing. We just haven't gotten there yet. So,
got it. Makes sense. Any thoughts, Josh?
I can't speak to staffing ratios. Yes, I can tell you what the design ones are. I can say, like, when it comes to optimization, like where design sometimes can support, and Hilary, you probably are aware of this since you're CX. Design has a practice called service design, which it's like the design that is beyond the product experience, but it's catered to supporting the customer experience. So it's not a staffing ratio thing, but it's more like a skills gaps, augmentation, optimization. But where design can support is, design can be at a place in an organization where they can say, okay, let's hire a service designer. They'll create service blueprints. They'll spend all their time not only optimizing what exists in the experience and the connections and the touch points, between the customers and the organization, and the quality and the quantity and the pains and identifying potential solutions and opportunities. But they'll also do that for all the new features that we're building as well, and connecting the impact of that product experience to the customer experience. So it's not a skills. It's not a staffing ratio thing, but it's like a area where think about, if you have a design organization, service design is an area where it's often outsourced these days, but it's starting to come in-house.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thanks. And Hilary, you kind of touched on this a little bit, as you were just talking, where you're starting to put some CS folks on these high potential accounts, right? And that's something we've always kind of thought about too, is you have a customer that's buying a small piece of, of your product or your platform, but they're a big company, right? So how do you kind of figure out what the real opportunities in the white space are with some of these customers that present opportunities to expand? So, and we've talked a little bit about this too, but how do you rationalize that with account management and kind of the sales function versus the customer success function? And I know you guys have been going through some of that. So I'd be interested to kind of hear what your thoughts are in relationship to how that all works together with the natural kind of tension, but also, collaboratively. Excuse me.
100%. It's definitely a learning and grow as we figure this out. I think that the number one thing that our sales team is really focused on expansion, full stop, right? So growing accounts, now that we're managing retention and renewals, it's a lot easier for them to just focus on growth. So all of the customer accounts that a CSM would have in their book also has an assigned account executive or expansion, focused person. But that person may have 200 accounts in there, whereas the CSM is only going to have maybe 30. So the sales person is going to be able to identify which customers, based on the data that we provide them, like they want to focus on maybe in that quarter or in that month. And there may be some that they want to work with the CSM on because the CSM has also reached out to them and said, hey, this one's right for growth. Like, I think you need to get involved because there's a lot of opportunity here. And so it's sort of this back and forth, just being really communicative. We have a lot of information in Salesforce, and then we also use Slack a ton, probably too much, but we have a lot of channels for every single client. And so there's a lot of conversations around like, hey, this is what just happened, just opportunities for the salesperson to jump in and get involved. But again, we're figuring it out. Like, it's probably not a perfect, Venn diagram of overlap. What I will say though is I do think, our hypothesis right now is that having a little bit more coverage and more eyes on, a larger book of the business will lead to faster growth, versus before where we were focused more on sort of like the top 100, and then there was a lot more automation built in, and it worked really well. But I think there was a lot of sort of these diamonds in the rough, or rocket ship companies that were sort of falling through the cracks. We're like, oh my God, if we would have gotten to them before this happened, we could have saved it. The other thing that CSMs are focused on within their book is obviously the health score. So if you have an account that isn't doing so hot from like a product usage perspective, your goal from a CSM perspective is really to focus on improving that health. Whereas the account managers or the account executives really only focused on the potential high usage customers. They're not going to spend their time trying to like reignite a company that's more of the CSM's realm. So it's more around like they're going to be focused on the ones that are fast growing, really high usage, high adoption, really engaged, because those are going to be a lot easier to grow. So that's sort of how we've differentiated it so far, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And there's always, I don't think we've ever figured it out over the years. There's always this, customer success versus sales. And that's where we're talking about incentives too, right? You incent the CSMs on new business in those customers, and you start to get unintended results there potentially. So Frank, how do you guys think about this? Do you guys take a model like this, or how does that work with your sales and kind of account stuff?
Yeah, it's similar to what Hilary was mentioning. I mean, we do have, we term a virtual account team. So there's a really tight alignment between the sales organization and customer success and my team as well. But there's very well-defined swim lanes as well. Who's focusing on what, and to get to the, hey, maybe it's a smaller opportunity with higher growth, potential beyond that. That is certainly one of the key aspects or characteristics I look at to say, hey, should we invest from a customer resource customer success resource standpoint with that account. Hey, it may be small today, but is there a larger growth opportunity there? And a lot of it is going to be built upon the trust within the virtual account team. Are you really certain about the white space that it can be addressed? What are you going after? What is the existing pipeline even, right? Especially if that customer is perhaps new to SAP, let's make sure we give them just a fantastic experience. So it's much easier to capture that additional, growth that, beyond just the initial opportunity. But that tight alignment within the virtual account team is really important. And that includes not just customer success, but it includes the license or the software sales side of that, the service delivery side of that. So really kind of covering all the different bases and making sure that we're aligned, acting as one SAP, if you will, with the customer. But again, the swim lanes are really well defined.
Gotcha. Thanks. Makes sense. Josh, any thoughts on this relationship to sales, account management versus success, and how it all kind of fits together?
Sure. So I usually tell folks, at least from the experience perspective, one of the most important things for sales, for a product experience, is the thinnest layer, the cheapest layer, but the one that everyone pays attention to when they think what is UX, which is the look and feel. Because folks make a decision about their trust in the solution in less than a second based on how your product looks, not how they actually interact with it, how it actually looks against their understanding or their expectations with their experience with the internet in general. Not just the competitors. So it better look nice. However, the most costliest problems are the ones where when you go deeper beyond the look and feel, and it's the interaction between elements within a page, between pages within a page, how those truly represent end-to-end, meeting end-to-end user needs. And so you have a prospect, they get converted, they love the experience, they actually start using it, and then CS is the front line, or customer experience, and they're suddenly identifying all the areas that were missed, all the areas that may potentially been letdowns, all the assumptions that were made in the beginning that now those assumptions were proven wrong, and how do we funnel these back into the product? And when I think of like objectives between them, and I may be wrong about this, but like on one side on sales, you've got, the objectives of, okay, how do we grow market share? How do we develop new markets? But there's other objectives after that are really important. Like where do we need to be at in order to support higher prices? How do we improve the lifetime value? How do we lower costs? How do we improve recurring revenue? When I see those, and I usually ask, okay, well, what does the whole company care about? Because do they care about all of these things? Do they care about some things more than others throughout from year to year, or do they care about all of them equally? Because what folk care about at the top is going to go downstream. So anyway.
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually kind of dovetails into a question we just got, which was, do you guys find the approach to this whole customer success thing, right, more of a kind of top-down enterprise strategy, like, hey, we are here to build our company around customer success and kind of things we talked about, right, which is it's the whole life cycle, right, that really is success. And is that more of a top-down kind of enterprise strategy discussion with you guys? Or, we've seen companies, and I've talked to, where it's kind of like it's the support team trying to kind of broaden their wings and saying, look, it should be broader than this. And it's more of a bottom-up kind of tactical approach. What's your guys' experience there? And that's one of the questions we got. So, and of the sales groups too, I guess, is part of that question too.
I would say, from my perspective, Ned, it probably started more as a bottoms up kind of need perspective, but then as an organization, as we've shifted course to much more of a SaaS type of business, it's really now become a top-down enterprise strategy, incredibly critical to our success of our customers and SAP. So again, it in the beginning started from a bottoms up, but for sure now top-down enterprise strategy without a doubt.
Hilary?
Yeah, we always joke that they actually hired a CSM before they hired a sales team here, because luckily, I think Rick understood the value of like having the support and the customer sort of relationship being key in the beginning. I think they actually hired him the same day, but it doesn't really matter. But I think having both is really important. In my experience at Guru, it's definitely been a top-down support throughout the entire, growth of the company. I think what has been an interesting shift as far as just like, while we have had a ton of support from the top, now that we are managing a number, which the board sees with retention and renewals, it does put a lot more of a light on the team and sort of the success and the impact that we're having. Which so I would encourage like other teams that are customer success, like if you're not managing a number, regardless if you want to or not, it does really impact kind of the resources and responsibility and sort of voice that you have internally, just business, right? And so that's been really helpful, I think, as we've grown. And then I also think we actually hired a new CRO recently, and he oversees both sales and CS. And so that's been cool because there's been a lot of collaboration from both teams around kind of all of the initiatives that he would care about, and versus having CS sort of under a different department. And so having us more connected to sales and connected to the growth of the business has been really helpful.
That's interesting. That's interesting organization structure too. Having sales and CS kind of in the same leadership is great. Josh, any thoughts here?
No, not for this one.
No worries. And actually, we're kind of coming up against the time here. I mean, I know time flies while we're talking about customer success and things like that. So I wanted to kind of reach back out to the attendees and see if there's any last questions that you wanted to kind of get under the wire here, because we're coming up on it. So, so we have a couple more that just popped in here. Who takes responsibility to build out the entire stakeholders for the customer success team? We find that not knowing all the stakeholders provides great risk. That's a good question around stakeholder management and things like that. So any kind of thoughts there?
I would say from our side, it's really important. Again, we have very well-defined virtual account teams that kind of help understand the stakeholders and the stakeholder map. But one thing we do is to really understand the relationship with each of the stakeholders and go through that assessment to understand, hey, are we viewed in the same way we'd like to be viewed, or does the customer view us the way that we're actually performing? So yeah, that identification and then sitting down with those stakeholders to understand the relationship is really important to get a good foundation to move forward from a success discussion.
Yeah, at Guru, it's super important to have stakeholders involved from a customer standpoint. I think having some sort of rallying event is really helpful if you haven't had the opportunity to meet sort of a C-level or more of a higher up decision maker within your customer. And trying to make sure that they're at the event is obviously key. One of the things we tried to do is have executive sponsors internally. So all of our top customers also get paired with a leader at Guru. And so not only are you going to the call with your potential client champion and saying like, hey, we're excited to meet your VP of sales, but you say our VP of sales is also coming. And so that can be a really cool way to sort of create those bonds and make sure that there's executive alignment and like relationship building outside of you just sort of talking through how great the product usage is and how much they're getting value out of it. So really making sure that you're not only getting them to show up, but also having some of your sort of higher up folks show up as well really helps solidify those stakeholder relationships.
I can only answer that for design, not for CS. So
good. Well, hey, we're at the time. So, but the good news is you can stay and go to our roundtables right now, which are going to open. We have 3 virtual roundtables that our panelists are going to jump into as well. So we have enterprise customer journey and for CS and renewals. We have how UX CX supports CS and renewals, and why customer success should own retention, not account management. So those will be our breakout rooms that are going to happen. But I'd also like to thank our sponsors again of PACT and all the supporters that we have, and then really thank the panelists. I thought, guys, this was a great discussion. I certainly learned a lot. It was really good to hear your guys' experiences. So Frank, Hilary, and Josh, can't thank you enough for taking some time out this morning and having some coffee with us and talking to us about CS and all, and design and how we do all this stuff.